Hello, welcome to my podcast, Recovery Conversations with Brett Lovins, and that's me. Today's podcast, I'm going to have a conversation with my friend Keri Clark. We discovered drugs and alcohol together as wee lads, 13, 14, 15, right through there. We started experimenting with drinking and also began to smoke pot together. He and I parted ways, after high school. And he found himself on a trajectory similar to mine, as is common with this disease. Similarities jump out once I discover that I'm not unique or special in any way. That in fact this disease gets all kinds of people, and it got Keri as well, and he got himself out of it earlier than I did. So anyway, we weren't in touch for a bunch of years, and then we got back together, and we're both in recovery, and it's I think it's a fun conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Let's roll it. Well, let's start by just giving you a chance to introduce yourself, if that feels natural to you, Keri, and maybe what you do for work, because I know there's some overlap with substance use disorder and people who have mental health problems, et cetera. If you're up for that.
Yeah, for sure. No. Okay. And thanks for having me, man. I always enjoy talking to you, Brett. And I'm a big believer in what I perceive is that you're trying to do, and happy to be part of it. So yeah, my name is Keri Clark. I am a psychologist, and that means I have a doctorate of philosophy in psychology. I have a PhD, and I've been a psychologist since 2002, I believe, is when I got my license. So I've been doing that for quite some time. I currently work at a private practice in Bellevue called Pacific Behavioral Healthcare. We do not specialize in recovery. That's not our thing. But, anytime you work with mental health, you're working with substance abuse. And anytime you work with substance abuse, you work with mental health to a degree. I mean, they go together, right? Hand in hand. But it's not usually central to my current work, but it's certainly central to my life. And it's something that's near and dear to my heart. And I do have some clients here or there that's their primary thing. But it's a lot of times it's part of the picture for sure, because when we're struggling, we reach for things. And when we reach for things in excess, sometimes we struggle, right? So, and I just, more than anything, though, I view myself as kind of a pragmatist. That's the kind of spiel I give to people when they sit down and talk to me and come to see me for therapy, is more than anything, I want to do what works. What are you trying to accomplish? And let's figure it out. And I do really think it's interesting that we're here having this conversation. We're both in recovery. Our story started at the same time with this stuff. The very first drink I ever had was with Brett Allen Lovins, and the very first time that I smoked pot was with Brett Lovins, and the first time that I got high, which was the second time I smoked pot, was also with Brett Lovins, which was interesting. In an abandoned field in the middle of Yakima, next to the movie theater. So yeah, and I'll never forget those days. So yeah, it's great to be here, and I really like what you're doing. I like the idea that trying to make the recovery tent as big as possible so everybody can find a spot in it. I'm all about that.
Yeah,
all about it.
Yeah, and I'll just add to, and also people that are just maybe not ready to call themselves in recovery, but maybe they can rein it in. Maybe they can figure out a way to moderate and keep it in their lives and stuff. And that's a distinction that is really hard for people that aren't around this to understand. I propose that to you now, is that people say, well, why don't you just moderate? Why don't you just slow down? We parted ways I guess 88 when we left college or left high school. So we haven't talked a lot in many, many years, but I'm going to guess your trajectory after we parted ways.
All right.
Has some similarities to it.
Yeah. I would imagine so. Yeah. Well, that's interesting that you say about people who aren't close to this, not understanding. I think that's largely true, but that also goes true for why don't you just quit, right? And the assumption that, because I think all human beings, to an extent, we naturally operate from the frame of my perspective and who I am, and then it's really hard for people to truly take somebody else's perspective, because that doesn't mean just putting myself in your shoes. That means being you. in your shoes, right? Not just in your situation, things with my thoughts and feelings and understandings, values and biology, but truly, and it's different. If you've been there, if you're one of us, it is not a matter of willpower. It's not a matter of wanting. It's not a matter of intelligence. And part of my trajectory, I thought for years that it was because I'm the smartest guy in the room and I was going to figure it out because I'm smarter than everybody else. And that kept me going for a long time, because it couldn't be me because I'm not one of these guys. I'll crack the code and be able to do that, what you're talking about. But I also think some people in certain corners of recovery, the notion of that there's more than one way to skin a cat is difficult for them too. And, I've talked about that in our own conversations, a little bit offline about, I think abstinence is certainly probably the most tried and true way and probably the safest way. But, there's tons of research and people that have been lived healthy lives through harm reduction and figuring it out. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to figure out where it's too much and when and how to do that. And, I think the more we get away from the idea that anybody's got the one right answer and we all work together and through research and, support and whatever, and I think I really like what you've said on some of your other episodes about it's working for you, then that's great. I'm all for you. I don't want to take that from you. I'm happy. It's great. It's working for you, but that doesn't mean it's going to work for him or her or.
Yeah, that's great. Well, this is a great foundational start. I'd love to mine our way into some specific stories because I think stories have a way of bringing to light some things. One of them I'd love to bring forward. You already touched on the one where the first time we smoked pot, we're crouched down basically underneath arborvitaes, and and that was exciting. There's a lot of adventure and all that, and so I look back on that with a kind of fondness. I think you do. Yeah. So, but one of the, as we've had these conversations, one of the ones that stuck with me, if you wouldn't mind, I like this idea that we think we can figure out how to dial it in. If you have this thing, if you're resistant to the word disease, if you're resistant, condition, whatever, I continue to propose that some of us have this thing, and for me, it's binary. And I know many that it's binary. If I take a sip, I'm in big trouble because I'll go all the way. But one of the stories I remember you telling me was about dressing really nice.
Oh, yeah.
Will you tell that story? That's just a diamond.
Of course. And, in my experience, sometimes the people who are the most resourceful and sometimes, intelligent or at least cunning, sometimes have the longest runs because they're able to skirt the angles, right? And the other story that's probably worth telling in that regard when that stopped working was me in the back of a Washington State Patrol car, which there's pretty hard to talk your way out of that one. But so, yeah, I had many plays I tried to operationalize as how I'm going to be smarter and I'm going to quit or moderate that I tried to all failed. But so this was just a plain, how do I throw everybody off my trail? So I had a couple things that in work that I found helpful because I knew enough, and I also knew enough about mental health and I'd worked with enough straight up substance abuse people as I knew these are the things people look for, and I don't want people looking at me. So I had a deal, and one of my jobs, there was a morning meeting, almost every meeting where pretty much all the senior people were there. First thing I had to do in the morning. So I realized that if people are noticing me being hungover, particularly on a Monday, then it's going to start to add up. And I thought, what can I do about that? Because stopping drinking that was clearly not an option, and not drinking on certain nights of the week that wasn't going to work for me either. So I was left with how do I not appear hungover? So one of the things that I would do is the worse I felt, the more hungover I felt, the nicer I would dress to look more and more professional. And also that I would try to come in and give the illusion of being chipper. So I had this little deal. The worse you feel, the better you dress. So there's a tip. There's a pro tip for all you folks who are not quite ready yet to enable you a little bit longer. But yeah, that was one. The other one I had, same job, was don't ever drink yourself silly and have to call in sick on a bookend day of a weekend, Monday or Friday. They're looking for that. That's in the algorithm of HR problems. So if you need to do it, if you just got to absolutely have a crazy night and not be able to make it to work the next day, make it midweek, so there you go, kids. There's that will be in my book coming out soon, Brett. How to Keep Drinking and Fool the Boss by Keri Clark. So not a real book.
So much work, so much effort, so much deceit for ourselves and for others. And, and here we are. And you got sober quite a bit earlier than I did. You've been sober how long you've been sober now, Keri?
19 years, 11/21/04.
11/21/04. And so how old are you at that year?
My birth age, my belly button age.
Yeah. How old were you when you
34.
quit?
I was 34 when I got sober.
Okay. That's amazing and wonderful. And that's a good age. I always say to everybody, whatever age it is, that's the perfect age. 34 is good, man. 34 is really good.
Well, so I was in a place in my life where, I guess to talk a little bit about that. So I knew I was an alcoholic by that point. I had had subtle thoughts about, hey.
Before you keep going, I want to pause you and say, what does the word alcoholic mean to you?
Well, that's a good question. So to me, it means that I do have a disease and that if I have one drink, I will want more drinks, and there's nothing I can do about that. And the only thing that I can do to not want more drinks is to have no drinks. And that's just who I am. I didn't pick it. I didn't choose it. And to me, it's no different than if I had diabetes or, whatever else. I really do look at it that way. And I also think that's another thing, and a lot of interesting, at least I think they're interesting, but a lot of thoughts about that, about what that is, what it does in AA when you say I'm an alcoholic. And I think that means a different thing to in an AA meeting than it means to the average person too. And I think most people it doesn't mean I'm a piece of garbage, I'm a horrible person, I have no willpower. It means, hey, I got this thing. And in recovery, it means, I'm living a better life and I'm trying to be a service to the world. But yeah, that's what it means to me. And I don't view it of any negativity, or I really don't. I don't feel bad about it. I'm not ashamed to tell people. I actually tell people in my work when it's relevant, so.
Well, I interrupted you to make sure, because you said you knew early on, you'd come to grips with that word, that concept, that disease, and you knew you had. So keep going.
Well, the earliest thoughts of it weren't necessarily attached to a word. It was more, whatever this is, I got it worse than everybody else that I know, most people. And I knew that I had a problem because it started becoming obvious when you get out of college and talking about trajectory and things like that. And the arc, people start getting their stuff together. And then you start looking at people who you looked at college and like, boy, that guy's, and then it's like, oh, he's getting us. And I have my life together, but I when I got out of college, I was like, before I went to graduate school, I was like, got married and moved down to the Bay Area to go to school. And I wasn't going to drink at all. It was a budgetary one. We were in a shoestring budget too. I got to focus on school. This is a new me. Then, I get a couple beers was when I remember it was like a half rack. I can't remember what it was. And then boom, off to the races again. And I noticed that when I didn't make a point of it, I didn't talk to my wife about it or anybody else, because God forbid anybody else know. But in my mind, I remember that being an early thing. It clicked. It's like, that happened really fast. I told myself I wanted to do it, and I did it anyway. And that just a series of those things. So fast forward, honestly, I got a couple years under my belt where probably I'm saying alcoholic to myself. I don't remember, but I knew I couldn't. I knew I couldn't stop, and I knew I needed to at some point. But I think I told you this before. I often describe it as, for me, it was the same thing as kind of on a level of cleaning out the garage. I knew it needed to be done, but there's never a good day to do that. And there's never a day when I'm going to want to do that, ever, right? But I would wake up almost every morning, and I would actually pray for help. I'd say, please help me. I can't do this anymore. I feel so bad, like physically, not even just, and I remember I'd sit in my shower. It had this little bench on it. And I would stare in the water on me, and I'd feel so horrible. And I'd be trying to get myself together and being, please, I can't stop. I can't do this on my own. And that was for probably a couple of years that went on. And then, of course, I'd go dress extra nice so nobody knew I was hungover, go to work. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to gear change into something. So we grew up in a small town in eastern Washington, or Washington, depending on how you ask. And
Driving metropolis, I'd prefer, but yes, we'll take some.
okay, Palm Springs of Washington, we can just go right there.
Got it out.
And I think looking back now, I realize that we were a wild bunch. There were a lot of us. We were doing wild things, and the adventure of it was amazing. And
we also had an ethos, I think, of around what it was to be, and wild was cool, and we were definitely, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah, and back then, I look back and there was so much dangerous behavior. It's a wonder, there were some tragedies that happened that, and there were people going to rehab that I mocked.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
People in our high school.
Yeah. And so one of the things I'd love to talk a little bit about, because as I pivot my way into this new world of trying to be an ambassador for the concept of the disease model, et cetera, and be, somebody who's out there talking about it, I think one of the things of my story that I think we're going to be able to have some fun with is the part of my story that is when I'm still, as they say, in my cups. And anybody that came in anywhere close to my world that was not drinking, or that said anything against drinking, or that questioned anything in any way, I don't know what word to use, irritated, pissed off. I mean, maybe borderline hate them, which is horrible to say. And as I put out a podcast, and I'll just say this, man, I would have been so freaking irritated to listen to me. I would have been so irritated.
I'm sure. Me too, probably.
I mean, come on. Like, who are you good do-gooder, blah, blah, blah. I mean, yeah. I can feel that I know that energy's out there. I would have been it. So anyway, I'd love to play around with that one with you for a minute or two.
For sure. Well, and first of all, I'm really annoyed listening to you right now anyway. So just so you know, so you haven't lost a step. But well, for sure, I think to some degree we're all that person. It just may be different flavors of it, because if you surround yourself with people who are not doing what you're doing, then it shines a light on what you're doing and the fact of not everybody's doing it. And maybe so then, whether consciously or unconsciously, I think we all strive to, we find each other because we don't want to have that, right? We want to have this common experience. We don't want somebody shining a light on it or messing up or asking inconvenient questions or, all that kind of stuff. More so for me than being angered at people, I guess, which certainly I have plenty of stuff that takes me down that path. It was more, I found a way to have not be around you and you not be around me and just kind of cut you out.
Yeah.
And that also went during that period of time for marijuana as well. And you and I started making excuses to bag out at 9:00. Yeah. It was whatever it took to keep the party going. Right. And not to, you're boring. You're dead weight. You're absolutely. And I still have a healthy annoyance at people who I view as self-righteous and try to shove things on me or anybody else, which is not my experience of what you're doing here at all. And certainly not what I'm here to do. And not what I've heard of any of the things conversations we've had or your podcast. I don't experience that as this at all, but yeah. And those people who are there, they won't be listening to this right now, but the people, someone who's on the fence and who wants to hear a voice that's not just preaching to you or whatever, and somebody who's been there and somebody, maybe they do. And I think that everybody needs a place where they can go, that they can feel comfortable. And I don't think that exists in the world. I think that AA is tremendous and it works for so many people and it's pretty much free and it's everywhere and all the time. But it doesn't work for everybody either. And there's no free equivalent to that's around, and that's, I keep going back to this, the idea of the tent. Let's make it big. Let's get everybody under it. Let's have everybody, because it's a terrible thing, man. I mean, I don't need to tell you, it's a terrible thing. I mean, look, we also were two of the smartest kids in our junior high and high school, right? Not to be arrogant, but we were, right? And if it got us, who's it not going to get, right? And we had good families too that supported us. It wasn't like we were, could say we were, had it bad in that. No, not perfect, but it was not a matter of some thing befalling us. It's just we both had this bug. It's part of why we found each other. It's not all of it, of course, because we're really good friends, but it is. I remember when we met in seventh grade, you and me, different grade schools came to deal. I had been a pretty popular kid in sixth grade, but I came to seventh grade, and some of my friends had gone to because back then, it was junior high started seventh grade, and I was terrified. And I remember you sat behind me in English, and I'm sure you probably viewed me as everybody else did, as this nerdy kid, because I dressed up, my mom dressed me, and I was a really good student and polite and soft spoken. But I remember the first day of junior high, I was like, where are these drugs that people are going to come up and offer me? And I remember it was meant to be a scare tactic, but I couldn't wait. I'm like, somebody's going to come offer me. I remember thinking that. And I was like, where are the people offering me the free booze and drugs, And I went and found them eventually, and it wasn't free, but
Okay, I want to tell a story so I like this idea for me of straws in the camel's back. Like, there's a series of moments in time that weighed on me, and like you said earlier, Keri, between me and me, I'm not telling anybody else, but inside, that small voice knows that things are going sideways, right? And one of them is with you. So we're at our 20-year anniversary. What do you call that? Reunion.
Yep.
And I've already been drinking tequila with some friends beforehand, and I get there, and I'm just way too wasted, right? But I figure everybody, these are the people I grew up with. We all drank hard, and
that's the other illusion that you always have. Everybody, yes. Right? And then when you sober up, you're like, oh wait, it wasn't everybody.
It's like that Will Ferrell, that scene where we're streaking, and he's the only guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, we hadn't seen each other in a while, and I had this rich,
been a long time.
Yeah, strong attachment that friendship and getting together and everything. And this event has everything to do with getting as drunk as possible with people I haven't seen in a while. And I run into you, and I say to you, Keri, let me buy you a drink. And you said, I think you said, not an alcoholic one, but you can buy me a Red Bull. So I'm telling you something from what I said a minute ago. Keri, I was so pissed.
We've never talked about this part of that story.
I thought we had, but
not this part. We talked if you're going to go to the driving home part later, we've talked about, but
yeah, no, this is the part in that moment, like that it's like two magnets pushed together. Like the world doesn't make sense for a moment for me,
Wow.
And so
I did not even pick up on that. And that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, and then so that small voice, right? That small voice that's in turmoil. That's like, actually, Brett, because this is that straw on the camel's back. That part of me that's work hard, play hard, and we're here to party, and there's Keri, and let's get a drink, and all that is alive and well. And then that small part of me that goes, holy shit, maybe he's quit drinking. That's what I thought. And it was a profound moment for me. Like, it was like, is that possible that he's quit drinking? And then that other half of me is like, what a, blah, 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 blah. And I won't use the vernacular on here, but let's just say it's, inside, sure. It's ironic how that's all happening inside me. Right. And yet at that same time, in that moment, I had a profound straw on the camel's back, because it wasn't until like 3 years later that I asked you, did you quit drinking?
Right. I remember that conversation too.
Yeah. And so, or it might even be more than that. It might have been, well, we can figure out the math.
I think it was more, but I will always remember that conversation.
Yeah. And so there we were. And so it's just like these moments that come and go, these moments, these windows of opportunity, these handshakes with, things that come along. You just don't know how it affects you. Right.
Or seeds that get planted and they're dormant, and then they get, so that's interesting, because that would have had to been 2008, right? Would have had to, that'd be 20 years. We graduated 88. So I would have been 4 years in recovery, new, but not brand new. Right. But I was very strong in my recovery. And I remember going to that with a sense of confidence of I'm going to be who I am, but I'm not here to try to proselytize or be whatever, but I'm not going to pretend like I wasn't going to say I'm sick or whatever. I just thought, I'm going to be who I'm going to be, and, let the chips fall where they may. And because I wasn't trying to be that guy, but I was trying to be honest, which was a thing that I'd lost. Which is, I think, another horrible thing about this. When you're really active in your cups, like you said, somehow on some level at some point, there always has to be a lie. There just does, because you can't fully function, uphold every obligation. You just sooner or later, there's a secret or a lie, and I remember that. I also remember, if you want, do you remember the part on the way home?
A bit, not very well. No.
So you, and this was more from our conversation later when So I drove you home.
I do remember that.
You asked for a ride. You and our other friend,
another friend,
who's
another
good
friend,
dude. Yeah, who also sweet guy, always good dude.
Who by the way does not have this condition. Who by the way can drink moderately,
and was just having a good old time,
and was capable of going deep with somebody like me from time to time, and then go back to normal. So
and
anyway,
he's just doing his thing and being smart enough not to drive at the time, right? Yeah. So I give you a ride home, and at that point you were pretty soused, and that point I was annoyed with you, like you were with me, because it was and honestly, it was a little pathetic. It was kind of sad, because I'm looking at this guy who's my age and stuff, and I'm thinking, and honestly, my thought is, I'm glad that's not me right now. It didn't look like fun. And it's something about it, I don't remember, but there was just something about it that it just had all the feel that you weren't an amateur, and this wasn't just you. It just, I don't know, I couldn't tell, but something about it spoke to me and I'm not making this more dramatic than it was cool, but there was something that was like, it's like, okay, this is not, it just had that feel and that vibe. So you had mentioned, I'll buy you a drink sometime. That was another at the end, right? And I said then, hey, maybe a cup of coffee sometime. I'd love to catch up or something like that. And that also, you'd said, kind of stuck with you, because I would have loved to do that. But I wanted to make it be, hey, this is who I am. And also give you a chance to not look me up if you're not of interest, which you do. We then didn't get together for a while. What a coincidence. So I fairly often tell that story to people young in recovery or people struggling or whatever, about, you don't know when just this thing, you're the beacon for somebody else, or you're a thing. You just don't know, right? And so, and I take great hope for that, because I'm sure you have plenty of examples, and I do now, when you're the sober guy that people know, and you're the only sober guy that people know, you get that call and you could tell the tone of voice, hey, you got a minute? It's like, oh, so-and-so wants to talk about booze, and they, and then you become that person for people, which is a great privilege and an honor in my book. But yeah, and another example of how our tapestries intertwine at different parts of our story, which I think is fascinating, and how we're different people, but there's so many just similarities that are just, there's no outrunning this thing, right?
Yeah. And coming from the same background and having had all those conversations, when we did reconnect, I felt like we picked right back up, and, we don't see each other a ton, but it always feels just as comfortable as can be. And I remember telling you, and that I think I had like 9 months sober when I told you.
Something like that. Yeah. And
you told me, I can't remember. It's like, that's when I said, are you sober? I remember that. And this is years later after that incident.
It was years. Yeah.
Yeah. And you said, yeah, I've been sober all this time. And yeah, that was cool. And then we reconnected when I moved out here. And then for a while there, we were going to, I like to call them away games. We would meet for AA meetings out in between our houses and just randomize.
We had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, that was fun. We might think about doing that again, Keri. I would do that again. No, that was, it's just an example of, I think, for different reasons, I think we've both been people that are able to take a construct, but yet be comfortable making it our own and take what works and leave the rest. I think we were both that way with school.
You certainly were. I will never forget. I was talking about galling and resenting you. I still resent you for Mr. Smith in junior high giving you the Student of the Year award when I was clearly a better student. Damn it! But he said, and I don't think this. You can edit this out later. It's not recovery centric necessarily, and it makes you look good. So definitely want to edit that out. But I remember him saying, and what a great teacher too. He's like having the courage to stand up and speak his mind. And that was pretty cool. You know, we had some good figures in our life, but like, yeah, forget where I was going with that. That makes for a good podcast too. Old man forgets. Mia talks his way into a corner. I don't remember. Where was I going with that one?
Well, it's just a great compliment, really. That's the bottom.
That's the point. That's what it was all about.
Really good compliment.
Just taking it and making it work for you and leaving the parts that don't quite fit. But not everybody's constitutionally capable of that, right? So, and it's hard when you're sitting in a deal where you're being told, this is it, this is the playbook, these are the things, you know, and the whole deal. And both you and I have in common, manifest differently, but our instinct is to push back on that and not be told what to do, not be ordered around, right? Both of us. And you know, I think that's an interesting thing when it has to do with our journey and where we come and why we're trying to look for and offer something for everybody is, you know, it's hard. And going to those meetings, we did basically a Siskel and Ebert kind of review thing where we'd talk about after, you know, that's not something people on general time, they don't, but it made it fun for us. We changed the game a little bit. We made a little adventure out of it. When I first got sober and trying to kind of tailor my own AA program to myself is I realized that part of what is always drawn me to whatever substance is an idea of an altered state of consciousness. And I don't believe that's inherently bad, but there are ways to get it that you don't need to be high or drunk. And part of that is different experiences, getting out of your thing. So I went to a couple meetings like that. I deliberately, like I went to this famous, it was a Fremont biker meeting on Aurora Avenue, nighttime meeting. That was an interesting crowd, got propositioned by a prostitute on the way in. Then went to another nighttime meeting where people are getting into a fight. And it's like, but it was an adventure, right? You know,
let's talk about that a little bit. Cause we both share, you know, AA and I'll just call it out, AA.
The only requirement that people forget, the desire to stop drinking, right? That's the only requirement. And you and I both fit that. So I think we're still in the club.
So here's what's true for me. I think maybe unlike you or maybe the same as you, that small voice that I like to refer to would never, ever admit the word alcohol, ick. So that word doesn't have any meaning to me because it's an evil word and it means a lot of things.
Still?
No, not now. Now, but at the beginning. So the opportunity for curiosity of my condition was narrow and none. And so, you know, if you go listen to one of my earlier podcasts where I talk about the final days and final months and stuff, I can share some of that. But once I found my way into AA, and this is where I think there's a truism, or almost maybe even a kind of what's the word I want to use? A pattern. Being around people was super helpful. So
yeah,
it just so happened that AA was kind of the only game in town. And there were things about it that I despised and to some degree still do. But the truth is I could consistently sit down and be around people who drank like me and told stories that resonated with me, that had problems like mine, especially when it came to drugs and alcohol. Not always the same, different lifestyles and everything else. And I've come to believe over time that getting help and being around peers is, I'm going to use the word critical. I think it's critical. I think that
I couldn't agree more, man.
People that are sitting at home trying to do this on their own or like trying to muscle through it. Look, I did it. I know exactly about it.
Right.
But once I got into those rooms, and I will tell you right now, it wasn't a panacea, and it certainly wasn't I wasn't ready to hug everybody, but it was the beginning of me getting comfortable and hearing things that I needed to hear. So I'd love to propose that and let you knock that one around a little bit too. Do you agree with that concept that it's important to have community?
I honestly, as a psychologist, I would consider that settled science at this point. Social support. We are social creatures. It is profound for everything, right? Having a social support network, being with people who care, without question is healthy. Now, there are people who are introverted who need to also recharge their batteries and not be around people. But no, for sure. I also think there's an added and extremely powerful level of support that when you're in a room with people with similar experiences that actually understand, and you hear somebody, especially, I don't know about you, but somebody who looks way different life, different everything, and their story is exactly the same, and the thoughts and the craziness that goes, and then it's like, okay, well, I may be crazy, but then all the rest of these people are too. At least we're crazy in the same way, or maybe I'm not, right? It's hugely powerful. And absolutely. So I think the pumps were primed for me though when I came in, because I knew that, and I was wanting something to happen. I didn't want to choose getting a DUI. But then again, I don't know that I ever would have got sober without that or something worse. Nobody generally gets into recovery on a winning streak and wakes up on a Tuesday and my life's going so good I think I'll quit drinking today. I mean, it's probably happened. I don't know. But it's also, we're all different because I think that where our differences in our personality kind of come out and how we react to things like that. You have always been a person who has been vocal and strong in pushing back and standing up, right? Which Mr. Schaefer appreciated much more than I do. But honestly, that's your nature. And in many ways, it's been profoundly helpful because you're a strong person and you are a leader and confident and all those things. And for me, I think I tend to be a little bit more of a rule follower and maybe sneaky. And so I'm sitting in the meeting and you're like maybe despising the stuff. And I'm sitting in there going, I want to be the best at this and have everybody give me a gold star and get a good grade and be really, really good at AA. And then I started trying to figure out how I was going to make it better, which all the old timers really always love that when the new guy comes in with the good idea, Barry, how I'm going to change this meeting. And I remember there was this little bell I would ring when I was the secretary, and this old timer guy, he hated it so much, and it just disappeared one day. So I wrote that for a while because I was also so desperate for answers and help, and my home group really was special. It still is, but I did feel really good about it, and the people in there. I had a good friend who was a little farther on me, and he was the guy that got my call. That was the only person I knew. He's a psychiatrist, interestingly enough. And he got the call for me, and we went there together. And I actually had I without question followed everything. But I was always though waiting for the other shoe to drop, because there's no way there's not a gold membership where you're going to upsell me, or I got to go join your church. Or, it's got to be. No, nobody just gets together to help, and I can remember to this day, I was in a meeting and there was a matter of, personalities before principles coming up and people getting in an argument. And I remember thinking it was fairly early. I was like, oh, there it is. And thinking now I've tried this and it also does not work. So I can probably just say I tried it and either try something else or go whatever. I didn't have it that well thought out, but I was and then a guy in the meeting stood up. And he said, hey, and he cut it off. And it was really, it was interesting. But people, though, I also remember a time, and I shared something, a guy who came in at the same time I did, shared a reading that was not AA approved. And but he read something, which, and I get, you can't, there needs to be guidelines and rules because people left to their own devices are going to muck things up. But in my young sobriety, it stung me because I felt like he was getting slapped down, and I felt like he was trying, and I knew he was struggling, and he was trying to do this thing. And somebody stood up and said this, we really need not do AA approved literature, and that I felt that I despised it. It was self-righteous. It was BS, and I stood up and said, "Yeah, I got one last thing to say. I don't care if you read the effing phone book." as long as you're here to get sober. And then a pin drop, right? And I'm here, and I'm a new guy too, but you know, I struggle with those things as well. Partly now for me, just realizing that there is a certain amount of responsibility and potential danger with people who claim too much expertise where they're not experts. And considering yourself one, and you can look in the news for many examples of this, you have to be careful with it, right? And I think you need to be humble. And people lose that carefulness and that humility, and then they start really becoming dictatorial, and and that can be damaging, I think.
Yeah. I'll just say this as well. Let's parlay into this little topic. Helping others. You alluded to this a little while ago that, you'll get a phone call or you'll get somebody will come to you, and when I got loud at Cisco, that's a big company. And so I got a lot of private texts. And one of the things that I've come to believe over time is if I stay in my story, I'm good. Like as soon as I drop the word "you should" into the mix, or "this is how it is," or whatever else, it's potentially dangerous.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
I agree with you.
Yeah, and so this is, for those of you that are listening that are in recovery, and you think about wanting to help people, because here's the thing: is everybody in every meeting wants to help people. It's a rarity that you don't have across the board. It's just different ways of doing it, and the most good intentioned people can do things, including myself. I can look back on times when my efficacy and competence as far as providing some kind of support to somebody is less than stellar. Yeah, but I just lean on this idea that if I stay in my story, if I tell you what happened for me, if I tell you what works for me, right, if I tell you what I've seen as patterns, I can't see how I can go wrong. Like,
Yeah, no, that makes a great deal of sense. And interestingly, being a psychologist by trade, I'm constantly helping people, and in my work, and I think, not to sound arrogant, but I think I'm an exceedingly good psychologist. I have great faith in my ability, and I feel like it's what I'm meant to do, to help people, right? But even in that, where I am very confident in my expertise and my knowledge, that I know what to do, how to help, that, I still do not generally tell people "you should," because that's not where growth comes from, right? I think it's important to, what when everybody's coming in is something's wrong and their life is not how they want it to look like, right? And how do you get there? And that's the experience, strength, and hope, which has always been my favorite part, right? And for me, I've always, except for my very earliest, when I was really, really hardcore and doing everything, getting that gold star, I've used AA like I'm the crappy friend. You don't hear from me program for a while. Then I hit the skids, and I don't mean relapse, because that mercifully has been a part of my story, but something, other way of managing to step in it and make my life difficult, or some pain or something, and need the support, right? And maybe it's because I'm feeling vulnerable to drinking, or maybe it's just because I need it, and it's always there. And I would go in a lot, and I would talk about, I will say, if you're struggling, keep struggling, because that's part of it too, I guess only tangentially related, but going back, you were saying about our youthful experiences, and I kind of harken back, have positive thoughts about those times, right? I absolutely have positive thoughts about those times, and I don't think there's a darn thing wrong with that. We had adventures and so many things tied to it that were beautiful and fun and joyous, and that's part of the story, that there is a grief in when you say goodbye to what you thought was your friend of John Barleycorn, and I think that's something that I wish was talked about more, and that it's okay to feel that way. And that doesn't mean you're going to then just go back out and do it, but it's okay to say, it's sad, I miss it, because if it didn't provide joy and relief and experiences that we want to have, well, why do we all get hooked on this? It's not just biology, and that's an important aspect of it too, And I think it's important for people to be able to express themselves and talk about stuff. But I also think anytime you have a group of people, you also got to have some rules and regulations and thoughts or to keep things. Because otherwise, how do you keep somebody from talking for 47 minutes and everybody else falls asleep or coming in drunk or, it's a balancing act. It's easy to sit in the cheap seats and say, but there's also, it's like, well, it works too. So there's both sides of that coin.
Well, I love what you just said a minute ago. I just had a conversation with a new friend about that very topic, about this. He was talking about this longing and this sadness. He hasn't been sober that long, and we've used language like our best friend, and what I think a lot of people don't realize too is that if you're like me, where my entire life was built around it, everything was built around it, and it goes away, it's weird.
Yeah.
And it's weird to be a human experiencing.
It's scary.
It's scary. And there's a grief there. And even years later, every once in a while, I'll look at something and I'll go, I miss that.
Of course you do.
Yeah. So yeah, that aspect of it, I think that there's true suffering occurring for the active addiction, but then there's a weird thing about that. And I don't think that's ever come up on my podcast. And I'm glad it did here, is this idea that there's a sadness to say goodbye to that stuff.
Of course, it's grief. I believe it's something that I think about and I talk about because people don't talk about it, because I think the fear is I'm going to wax poetic and fondly and prime myself to stumble, right? Which is a reasonable point, but I think that's just another form of secrecy. If I'm sitting there thinking that, and I feel like I can't say it because somebody else is going to think that, then that's just getting in my way of being able to, I would never want to plant seeds for ill in anybody's head or be part of their downfall, but that's not my responsibility, when you're sharing and thing. And I think I've always found when you share something, when you allow yourself to be vulnerable in those meetings, inevitably people will come up afterwards. I'm so glad you said that, right? A lot of times. And I do think there's an aspect of that that's true that doesn't get talked about, that people are afraid to talk about, that people are afraid to think and feel. But we can grieve something and really miss it and realize it's also horrible for us at the same time. That's how complex the human experience is, and we can navigate those things. We can, and it really is, because it is hard. So many things are tied up to it. And then you go through a period of what does my life look like now, right? And I don't know about you, but I went through, there's a lot of things that are just plain, that's not fun anymore and I ain't going to do it. And then some of it came back. Not all of it did, right? But and there were so many things tied to that. And then some things are harder than others. Like, I don't know about you, but for me, dancing is something I enjoy dancing. And once in a while in the privacy of my own home, I will do it. But going out somewhere in public without a little liquid courage, it's harder to do it, and then not there. That's just an example, but, lots of things. And there is, and there's a void that you have to fill, right? Or you don't have to. And then there's also not only just the absence of stuff, there's also this cascading of things that you now have to deal with in the form of all these thoughts and feelings that I was able to, and stress and whatever else, navigate with just, I know what'll help for this, and now I don't know what'll help for this. And this is scary, and this is uncomfortable, and this is hard. And am I the only person feeling this? And I think that's another reason why when people share that they're struggling, they're having a hard time, and in the meeting, but I know what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to go have a drink right now, but I sure am feeling miserable. So,
yeah. Well, this has been a lovely conversation. My partner in crime from years ago, Keri, thank you for coming on the podcast. We should do it again. And I think we should try to do some away games again. I just had sort of revisiting that in my mind and heart. Those were fun. Because then we could go and BS about it. And one time we even got fed breakfast, remember?
Yes. Yeah. I do. I actually really, I really liked that one. That was fun. Did too. Well, yeah, she was a really nice older lady. And then, yeah, for sure. And for everybody, whoever finds their way to this conversation, we're just wanting you to find a place that's safe and that works for you. And if that place is something that you're fervently believed in, that we both said we don't like or makes us mad or frustrated, then good for you. Piss us off. Do your thing. We're for you. You know, I don't mean to speak for you, Brett, but I think I do, right? I mean, it's like we're all a team here because this thing is horrible, and it's bigger, it's stronger, it's smarter, it's faster than any one person. It just is, like you were saying about people. You don't beat this by yourself. You just don't. You know, I mean, people here or there, but on average, your odds are not good, and that's okay. It doesn't make you weak or dumb. It just makes you human.
Awesome. Thanks for the conversation, Keri, and thanks to all of you that are listening to my podcasts. Appreciate the feedback when you send it along. You can do that at brettlovins.com if you want to. I do read those emails and comments there. So next week, I've been invited to go to a conference, a recovery-friendly workplace conference just outside of D.C. It's put on by SAMHSA, which is the big government entity. And a lot of the people that I admire and that are pioneers in this space will be there, and I'm just stoked to be in the room with these people and learn and network. And I may even put on a tie, which is terrifying to me. I'm just going to be flat out about that. I have not worn a tie since 9th grade dinner dance, and that tie was knit, and it was pink. So there's that. But if you are listening to this podcast and you're attending the SAMHSA event outside of DC there, awesome. If we aren't already connected, let's connect. So I'm into this. Let's keep helping change the world. Thanks, Keri. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Take care.